I wanted to work through a couple different problems with you guys that are Punnett Square problems with a simple dominant or recessive gene. Now these problems, you've seen them on the Punnett Square quiz, but we're going to have it on the test, and most important, I want you guys to understand what we're doing instead of kind of guessing and getting it right half the time and being like, that was close. Alright? So I want us to be able to work together and figure out some of these Punnett squares. The 4 words that we need to know, again, those 4 words that we need to know are homozygous, heterozygous, dominant, and recessive. And that's going to help us figure out the parents, the children, everything we need to know for the Punnett squares. Homozygous, heterozygous, dominant, recessive. Hopefully you recognize some of the differences here. Importantly, dominant and recessive, we just talked about. Dominant and recessive, which one of these is the capital letter? Point to it on your paper. Right, so dominant is the capital letter. That means recessive is a what letter? No, don't look at me. You think about it. Alright, it's a lowercase letter. Perfect. So dominant, capital, recessive, lowercase. Now, homozygous and heterozygous. These ones seem to be a little trickier. Heterozygous and homozygous, they've got they mean, each one of them means one thing. Now, homozygous and heterozygous are a little trickier. These are the ones that some students here have been getting mixed up on. Homozygous means it has 2 of the same alleles, or it means that the letters it has are either both big or both small. Heterozygous means different. And hopefully you remember at this point, homo means the same, hetero means different. So heterozygous means 1 big letter and 1 small letter. So out of any given set of normal alleles, and again we can look at the ears because we've seen that letter before, you have 3 basic options. You can have a homozygous with 2 big letters, a homozygous, meaning 2 of the same letter, with 2 small letters, or a heterozygous in the middle. Homozygous with big letters is called homozygous dominant because it has 2 big letters, which are the dominant gene. Remember the big crazy person running around the room. Homozygous recessive means you have 2 of the same thing, 2 of the same little letters sitting there. 2 quiet people in the room, you notice them. In the middle, heterozygous, that's probably the easiest one. You don't even have to think. It's always going to be heterozygous, means 1 big letter, 1 small letter. And with these genes at least, it means that it will always be the dominant trait. So heterozygous, for the different traits, we know that if you have 2 giant big crazy people in the room, you get earlobes. If you have 2 tiny quiet people that are like, yeah, we should be attached to the head, you get attached earlobes. And again, that means a free earlobe away from your head or attached to the side of your head. In the middle here, for some reason this confuses a lot of people. Again, heterozygous means 1 big, 1 small, and it always looks like the dominant gene because it has a dominant gene in it. If there's 1 big crazy person in the room, if there's 2, you're going to notice it. If there's 1, you're still going to notice the big crazy person. So here, you're also going to have earlobes. So the phenotypes, the dominant trait for heterozygous, and the recessive trait for homozygous recessive. So what I want you guys to do now is we're going to play a game on your paper. And you can just number along with me, alright? And we'll do some problems and we'll give you some answers. See if you got them right. So the first one, number 1. The letters we're using for this game are going to be H, okay? So, we've got a capital H and a little h. For number 1, I want you to write down the letter for the dominant trait. And we don't have to know what trait this is to know which letter should be the dominant trait. So for number 1, write down the dominant trait. For number 2, I want you to write down the recessive trait. Alright? For number 3, I want you to write down the genotype, or the 2 alleles, of what would be a homozygous recessive. For number 4, I want you to write down the genotype for heterozygous. Number 5, let's write down homozygous dominant. So homozygous dominant, alright? And now I'm going to tell you what these traits are. We're going to use capital H for straight hair. And we're going to use lowercase h for curly hair, alright? For number 6, I want you to write down the phenotype, so what would the hair look like, for this combination. So would that be straight or curly? For 2 capital H's. For number 7, would that be straight or curly hair? Write down straight or curly. And for number 8, alright, 1 capital H, 1 lowercase h, would that be straight or curly? And here we go with the answer key. Number 1 would be a capital H, number 2 a lowercase h, number 3 2 lowercase h's, number 4 a capital H and a lowercase h, number 5 2 capital H's, 6 would be straight, 7 is curly, and 8 is straight. Alright, now if you followed along with all of that, you're probably doing pretty well on Punnett Squares. We're going to give you a couple, or I'm going to give you a couple more problems that are a little more complex, and we'll work together to figure those out.